Welcome to CivilNet. I have a very special guest joining me via Skype from Paris, France. He is a French-Armenian photographer, Bardig Kouyoumdjian. Bardig, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for you.
We met many years ago when you had just published your fantastic book. It is called Deir Zor, On the Trail of the Armenian Genocide of 1915. You are a grandson of genocide survivors. You are a photographer. You traveled to Deir Zor, which is the final location, resting place of perhaps hundreds and thousands of Armenians who lost their lives during the genocide of 1915. And now we are 2015. We are in the centennial year. And we wanted to talk to you about why it was important for you to go on that journey and to capture the images of those people who, some of them Armenian, were left behind, became Muslim, created their own families. Why was it important for you to do that?
When I was a kid, I was looking for pictures in the books to find how Armenians lived at that time and how they were killed, or I was kindly trying to find how people were living at that time. So many years later, when I became photographer, I wanted to get back to these places, to know how people were living at this time. It was in 2001, 2002, 2003 in Deir Zor, but I began to photograph the Armenian Genocide history, or the memories of the Armenians in 1985. And since in Lebanon, I was at that time in Lebanon, and I was photographing the Armenian genocide commemorations till 88, when I came to Paris, and I continued to photograph here in France or other else, in Canada, in Armenia, in Syria, and then when at 2001, for the first time when I came to Deir Zor, I saw that nothing was done on Deir Zor. So, we have no pictures of the massacre or massacre places. We don't know anything about Deir Zor. Deir Zor for us, it's in our imagination, it's a desert. But I found a town of 2,000 inhabitants. I found an Armenian church built in 1885. It was Catholic Armenians. They have built their church at 1885. There was families, Armenian families living there. There was Armenian survivors who became Bedouins. So I wanted to photograph them, and it was for me an emergency to get back many times to find last traces, because at that time it was possible to find some survivors, but they were the last survivors.
Yeah, because I remember looking at your book and reading through your books. I mean, it's not only photographs. You tell the story of the lives of these people. And there were some really moving stories of how families had been torn apart, how they had lost their children. And then years later, there was one particular story of a woman who had lost her son during the genocide, and then was reunited with her husband. And then years later, she went village by village looking for her son, and she found him. Could you tell us that story, please? I think today, 100 years later, it's so important that we realize that these stories, these family histories, are really part of the collective narrative of the Armenian people.
Yeah, it was in 2001 near Tel Abyad, at the frontier of Syria, between Syria and Turkey. And I went to meet Abdallah Talal. Abdallah Talal, his Armenian name, it's Hagop Kouyoumdjian, but I have a story also related to that. So I met Hagop Kouyoumdjian, who is Armenian. He lived as Armenian. He left with her family, maybe Urfa, and came to the desert. Her mother, she was very sick, and she gave her son, Agop, to a Bedouin to take care of him. So many years later, she survived the genocide. She returned, as many people, to Aleppo. Then she met her husband, who is not dead. They rebuilt a family. They get sons in Aleppo. They lived in Aleppo, but she was very sad to know that one of her sons are in the desert. Years later, she get back to find and found her son, and the son was big enough to have family, to have children. Then Hagop Kouyoumdjian, or Abdallah Talal, gave one of his sons to the Armenian family to be raised as an Armenian. His name was Aziz. He became Antranik. So the history returns back in some way.
Yeah, it's an incredible and such a touching story, and there are countless stories like that.
Yeah, but years later, when I published my book in English, and I have a Facebook page named Deir Zor, someone sent me a message to tell me, I know this guy. He's the brother of my grandfather. And the history is the name of this guy. It's not Hagop, as he told me, but his Kevork. Why he told me that his name was Hagop, I don't know. The guy who I met on Facebook confirms me that the story is true, that the son Aziz is Armenian now. His name is Antranik. At that time, they were living in Aleppo, and since I don't have news about this family. Many other stories. I met Ali Vannes, who was Armenian too. Vannes is maybe a name they gave him in the desert. The Bedouins gave him this name. And he's supposed to have a sister. He came to visit him, but when I met him, he told me that since 50 years, no one came to see him. It's a very sad story.
And you were the first person who went to see him?
Nobody from his family, Armenian family, came to see him. Why? I don't know.
Bardig, as I said, you went, we've been talking about to Deir Zor, and you went to those sites where there are countless bodies or remains of those Armenians in Markadeh, in Shadadi.
Yes.
And in Deir Zor, there was a chapel that housed some of those bones, and actually there was a pillar beneath which the soil was brought from the different vilayets of Western Armenia.
Yes.
With the war in Syria.
And especially there was a museum in that...
in the chapel, right. That
chapel.
Housed lots of artifacts.
Yeah, there was many artifacts, and I am sending a message to all the world. I am looking if there's a list of these objects that were showed in this museum. If they were listed, the origin of these objects, the dates. We are preparing here with a radio station, France Inter, in Paris. There will be, how can I say, a video. We are preparing a video on the website of this international, not international, but national radio station, and we are looking for informations about these art crafts that were blown up with the ISIS.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, is that during the war, the Deir Zor region is now under the control of the Islamic State, and that church, that chapel that housed the bones and the museum and all of those artifacts from historic Armenia was blown up. And so, in fact, even the final resting place of those who were killed on the deportation routes, of those Armenians who were killed during the Armenian Genocide, in a sense, our Auschwitz has also been destroyed today.
Yes, yes. We lost the last traces of the genocide. There's not only in Deir Zor, but in Markade, in Shaddade, in Suar, in Marat. We lost everything. The only thing that we have now, it's pictures of these places.
Okay, so why don't we help with your call to ask anybody who has a list of those artifacts that were housed in the museum at Deir Zor, because
yes, he can send me very quickly, because the program, the video is scheduled for April, so we must have documents to talk about. I have pictures of almost any object in art craft that was in the museum. I have photographed them at that time, but we don't have any information about these objects.
Right. It's a very, very devastating story and a devastating end.
Yeah.
It was really a sacred place, a holy ground for Armenians. Many Armenians who would go to Deir Zor and to those massacre sites, and now even that has been taken away.
Yes,
but
yes.
Just in closing, I'd like to say that also the Genocide Commemoration, the Centennial Commemoration Committee of Lebanon, has distributed your book to all the embassies in Lebanon.
Yes.
So I think that the work that you have done, luckily and thankfully, by capturing the stories and the images of Deir Zor, something that perhaps may now be lost forever to us, at least you have immortalized them. So I'd like to thank you for that effort and for the continuing work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest was a French-Armenian photographer, grandson of survivors of the Armenian Genocide, Bardig Kouyoumdjian. Stay with CivilNet.